This conference will now be recorded.
So in this session, let's dig more about integration. So what is integration and how we are going to do in Salesforce. So technically, when we talk about integration, what are the components associated? So okay, in previous session, we understood integration is nothing but communicating between two different systems, where we can do user interface integration, we can do business logic integration, we can do data integration, or we can do security integrations. And each of these we'll discuss in detail in upcoming sessions. Now, when somebody say integration, what it means? So now there is nothing but I'm going to communicate between my client and the server. So I can communicate between two systems. So one system going to be client and another system going to be server. So how this communication happens between two systems, that's the primary part. So now let's understand the concept. Let's consider, let's take a normal human being example to understand when we talk about integration, what are the things we should consider. Okay, let's see, I'm a human, okay, and let's say you are another human, like just I'm talking in the human being example. So how we are going to integrate? So two things may happen here. Now let's see, I'm treating you as a server. You are providing server in the sense who provides some kind of service, and who is going to consume that service, or who is going to access that service or use that service. I can call them as a client. So now between you and me, what I want to do. So now let's consider you have one e-library application, or you are going to provide some kind of library, not e-library, some kind of library you have, where you can give books to the people. Okay, you can issue some kind of books. You have so many books, you can give the books who want. Now I want integration book from you. So what I say, then I will ask you, can you give me a integration book? That's I will ask you. So now when I'm going to ask you, what is going to happen? So now in the world there are many peoples. So first question, do I know you? Okay, why are you going to give me the book? So where are you? How I'll call you? How I'll ask you? To that means to call you or to ask you, I need some kind of mechanism. Okay, my requirement, I want to get integration. So in the world there are so many persons who are going to provide the books. So how I should reach to you? So how I'll communicate to you, and where you are exactly, and in which way I can communicate. That kind of thing we need to understand. So first I need to understand, if I want to get a book from you, then I have to find out where you are. Nothing but, can I say your address? I want to find out your address, where you are. So once I find your address, okay, then I can go and knock. Hey bro, can you give me this book? Then now next thing, uh, if I go to get a book from you, I need a, like, like if you give me a book, how I can bring that book with me? To, like, if it's a one piece of book, I can come with a bag to keep that book. And to bring your book, I cannot take a bottle with me, or I cannot take a soft drink bottle where I can fit my books. So that means there should be a proper transport layer. When my communication happens between you and me, some proper transport layer should be there. So now before to that, I should know, okay, you are going to provide the service of like issuing some kind of books. So all this kind of thing. So how this communication is going to happen, that nothing but we call it as binding. This is theoretical, I'm explaining it, and I'll explain in detail how it's going to happen. So now I know where you are, I know how you are going to accept the request. So you may have a policy, okay, so you, if you want to get a book, just give me a call on this number or WhatsApp me. You are only these two mode of communication you have established. So if anybody call you or WhatsApp you, you will issue the books to their address. Or you may have some mechanism. If you want to get a book, you just come to my office and physically take this book and go. Okay, so that kind of communication transport layer you can define, which I can say more in binding part. So how you are going to bind with the client. Okay, same way, in the same context, we can say, like you are giving the books, you may have some different kind of services also, which we don't know. So now this service you are providing, how the client will know what kind of services you're providing? That comes as the contract. Something like, you can say something like contract. So now whenever there is an integration between two systems, to make a successful integration, always you have to think three things, ABC of it. What A, nothing but address where my service is hosted or where my server is, and how I can communicate to server, the nothing but my binding, and then what is the contract. So what kind of service they provide to us. Okay, so now I can get a server which providing service of currency exchange rate, or I can get a server which providing service of weather forecast. So how I'll get to know? Because in the contract they mention, okay, I'm a server, I'm providing currency exchange service. You consume this service or you take this service, use it. So with this kind of request, I'll give this kind of response. Or I have a weather forecast. If you pass me which date forecast you want, I'll pass that information to you. So that communication layer being defined between the client server to make a successful integration. When you want to integrate between two systems, you have to find out where my server resides, how I can connect as a binding, then when I connect, what I will ask them, what I want from you. That nothing but my contract. So that complete scenario we need to understand how my server is hosted, how I'll communicate, and what the things I can expect from my server. So once I understand that, then I can build my request. I will build my request in which format my server want. Then that request will go to my server. My server will process the request with authenticating it. Then in the same time, my server going to send back me response. Okay, you have called for these things, this is my response, take and process what you want. So this is nothing but integration between the system. When you want to integrate between two systems, simply build the request in client side, send to appropriate address with proper binding with what contract you want. Then your server will give the response as per the defined contract to the client. Then client can process that response and then they can do whatever you want. This is simply, we can say, integration, integrating between two systems with client and server. Server have an address, binding, and contract. So in technically, if you see, anyhow, this file, what you see here, the SOAP file, I will explain in more detail. Okay, but to understand theoretically right now, for any integration, we need to have an address, we need to have a binding, we need to have a contract. So we need contract, we need binding, we need address. So address nothing but the endpoint or server address to connect where my server is hosted. What is the endpoint? From where I'll get? Let's say I want to communicate to with you. If I don't know where you are, how can I connect? Okay, if I connect, then if I know, okay, right now you are in India, okay, you and I want to connect, so you can say, okay, you can make a phone call to me or you can do Skype it to me. That's nothing but my binding happen. So now you can say, if you call me, then I can explain this kind of concepts in integration. That's my contract, that's my service, what I'm providing to you. That's nothing but complete integration mechanism what we have. So any integration you do, simply you have to define where my server is, what is the endpoint or server address to connect. Second, we'll see binding, so the way client is going to communicate with server. And third, the contract, so what service my server going to provide. So if you see this file, what I'm showing you here, anyhow, this file I will I'll explain in more detail. But now, whenever if you have any SOAP kind of service, I'll talk what is SOAP in detail. So you can see they're completely defined. If this is a one service I'm providing, then you can see where my web server or my server hosted, that comma as my address. You can see the address here, the location where my server is and how I can do it, and then what is my server name, what service I'm going to provide. Okay, so now you can see same way what kind of binding it is. Okay, you can define the binding. Okay, complete binding, how I'm going to communicate between the server, that binding. When I with this service, with this binding, what kind of contract I have. Contract nothing but each operations. I have operation like this. This is my operation. Send document for each signature, one operation I may have. Okay, this is sample one which I'm showing you. So here by seeing this WSDL kind of file, I can understand where my server is, the address, and how it is going to bind. You can see it's a TNS binding with a transport layer of HTTP. Okay, and then we can see the operations nothing but what is the contract or what is the service I'm going to provide, this kind of thing defined. But to completely understand, when you do integration, we are going to build some request sending to a address with proper binding and assessing the contract what server have, then server giving the response in the defined format, then that response we can take in client and we can process how you want. And everything if you see in this XML kind of file, I'll explain in more detail. You can see something binding, something called operation, and something called address. So for this binding, okay, you see the address defined something like this. So in this address, I have my web service hosted. Okay, so in the next we'll see what are the different mechanism we have in Salesforce to integrate. So overall we understood when I talk integration in any language, it may be Salesforce, it may be non-Salesforce, it may be anywhere, you have to follow this kind of thing. Just understand ABC of integration. Okay, so ABC of the server, what is the where my server is, how I can communicate to them, and when I communicate what I will get, address, binding, and contract. Once I get, then we can see how I am going to do integration in Salesforce. What are the different mechanisms we have to integrate in Salesforce? Okay, so if I want to integrate from Salesforce to Salesforce or from Salesforce to non-Salesforce, then how I am going to establish it. Okay, so stay tuned for next session. We'll discuss in more detail what more thing we can do here. Thank you.